Coming up next is the Dr. Kim Taylor Show. Here's your chance to talk about what matters to you. Although you'll receive helpful advice from Dr. Kim, remember this is not to be construed as any form of psychotherapy, diagnosis or treatment, and cannot replace a therapeutic relationship with a mental health professional. You can reach Dr. Kim by calling 564-1290 or 866-564-1290. You can also listen live on the internet at drkimtaylorshow.com. Now, here's Dr. Kim.
Everyone experiences shame to some degree. It just seems inevitable. But what exactly is shame, and why is it so hard to talk about? The feelings of shame are certainly a universal feeling. What happens is that you either feel or believe that something is really wrong with you, and therefore you fear that you will eventually be found out to be unworthy of being loved and accepted. The feeling of shame can come from the belief that I'm basically flawed, bad, wrong, inadequate, unimportant, undeserving, or just plain not good enough. And we can develop shame as a child as a result of feeling unloved or unaccepted by others. But what happens is that we conclude that there was something wrong with us because of what happened, and that we start to blame ourselves about the reason why we were treated that way. And as the problem continues, what happens is our own self-talk chimes in. And you know that critical voice. It's the one in your head that plays nonstop, 24/7 on the ticker tape at the bottom of the screen of your brain. And it forecasts the worst possible outcome at every turn. But there are also many other ways that shame can develop. And the point is that if you leave it hidden in the shadows and you never take it out and examine it, then shame can have a devastating effect on your relationships, on your career, and even your self-esteem. When you don't understand the origin of shame or how to challenge it and overcome it, then shame becomes a very powerful and potentially dangerous emotion in your life. So with that in mind, my guest is Susan Warren Warshaw. She is a specialist on the issue of shame, and she's going to be talking to us about how shame affects all of our lives and how we can learn to live with it and feel good about ourselves. So join me. You can call in at 805-564-1290 with your questions, or you can send them to my email at drkim@drkimtaylorshow.com. I'm going to take a short break, but I'll be right back with my guest. I'm Kim Taylor, and this is the Dr. Kim Taylor Show.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
We are talking about what is shame and why is it so hard to talk about it. My guest is Susan Warren Warshaw. She's the founder of the Dynamic Emotion Focused Therapy Institute. It's a training program for psychotherapists in Los Angeles. She is also a licensed clinical social worker, a board-certified diplomat, and a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has a private practice in Woodland Hills, California, treating individuals and couples, and specializes in anxiety, depression, relationship issues, and self-defeating personality traits. She also presents on the issue of shame at conferences and workshops, and will be presenting a program on surmounting shame for psychotherapists in LA in September on the 26th and 27th. Welcome to the program, Susan.
Thank you, Kim.
Do you know, it seems that in order for us to really be able to live a happy and meaningful life, that we must talk about some of the things that get in the way. And one of those things is certainly shame, and it's something that we all experience. So please help us here, and just let's start out and define for us exactly what is shame.
Sure, Kim. The root of the word shame means to cover, such as covering oneself, and it's related to being seen in a way that we perceive to be unfavorable. It's universal, it's hardwired. Researchers have evidence that it starts in infancy, the precursors of shame, And it's an internal signal that we've stepped outside of some social bounds and we feel a relational threat. It's also a moral emotion. We're not going to feel shame if we don't care about our relationships. And, of course, I think most of us know it can be a very painful emotion in the body. If it's involved with self-attacking thoughts, it can become excruciating. And it certainly inhibits. It stops us in our tracks.
So is shame just something that is experienced just in our head with the thoughts that we have, or tell us how it really does affect us physically?
Sure. Before I get to the physical, I'd like to share with you something that a client said to me about how she experiences shame. She said, it's like a thought won't even be formed in my head that I can pick up on, but my body gets totally pervaded with a negative feeling that doesn't have words. But the feeling, if I had to find words, is something like I did something really, really wrong. Or if I weren't here, everyone would be better off without me. It's this sticky, gooey, awful. And I'm like, wait a minute, that feeling all by itself, even if I didn't have words to go with it, is self-attack. So when you ask about triggers for shame, certainly, actually, anytime we do something new and we don't have mastery yet, we're likely to feel shame. Being bullied, being different. I myself am a tall woman, and I really experienced what it is to feel shame because I stood out and got that kind of attention. People feel it over their appearance, their body image. I remember a woman who did not actually have a mirror in her entire house, which was very, very sad. Money and work is a trigger. Somebody tells you how much they earned last year, and you're comparing yourself. Certainly parenting. None of us will ever do that job perfectly, and people are very susceptible to feelings of inadequacy around that. Family. I'm thinking of somebody I worked with where he would come home after school, be playing in the street with his friends, and his dad would come home drunk and wanted him to come in to dinner, and he'd whistle at him like a dog, is how he described it. And it was really horrendous. So family can be a source of shame. Certainly addictions, sex, having physical, mental, emotional health problems. Sometimes someone may be losing jobs because they're depressed, but there's so much shame that they don't allow themselves to ask for help. Aging, maybe we need to start using a walker, but it's so hard to expose that our bodies are declining. So maybe we end up falling because we don't want to expose, that we're aging. Surviving trauma, certainly sexual abuse trauma, people very typically will blame themselves, feel horribly ashamed when the shame really does not belong to them. And being stereotyped or labeled are some common triggers.
So we take all of this in that we can be triggered in a variety of ways. But what then happens is that it fills us with some kind of self-doubt. We start to feel like we are inadequate, and that kind of triggers the vulnerability within us that should people find this out, that we will somehow be dismissed or rejected or unlovable, etc.
Correct.
Okay, so it is basically the thoughts that go in our head, but they can manifest and come out in certain ways that we even hold ourselves in a physical way, or whether or not we sometimes get sick, correct?
Well, yes, I definitely think that shame can have some devastating consequences to us, and often we make these assumptions about what other people are thinking and feeling about us that may have no relation to reality at all. And, Brene Brown is a great shame researcher, and she always said that what makes us vulnerable is also what makes us beautiful and what connects us to each other. So we really need to reframe our vulnerabilities and see them as, that which connects us in a very human way.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating that for most people, if you ask them, who are the people that you really feel connected to, that you feel comfortable with, that you like being with? And they will always say it's the person who laughs at themselves. It is the person who doesn't have to be perfect. And yet, the person that can observe that is still the person who has difficulty allowing themselves to be vulnerable, to be imperfect. They still somehow feel like they have to uphold the standard, but they can see that people who don't have to do that are far happier, and other people are happier to be with them.
Yes.
What is the difference between guilt and shame? Because I think a lot of times people get very confused with this.
Sure. Well, shame is a more global feeling about the self. I am bad. I'm just fundamentally bad. It's a very self-focused, although it does occur within relationship, but it's internal. And guilt is an awareness that we've hurt someone, healthy guilt. I might say there's healthy guilt and toxic guilt and shame. But with healthy guilt, we recognize we've hurt someone. We feel remorse, and we want to do something to repair the damage.
So guilt is really that you feel like you did something bad, but shame is really that you feel that you are bad.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I might say, we may get into this, but there is healthy shame as well as healthy guilt. So
go ahead and speak on that. What is healthy shame? How can we use it in a productive way?
Sure. Well, I can tell you I prepared for this show because I want to avoid shame. So that's a good thing for our audience. Healthy shame is going to make me sensitive to the feelings of others. It doesn't mean I'm going to tolerate or encourage any kind of self-devaluation, but I certainly am imperfect. I will err, and I need to be sensitive to the cues that I get from other people. So when I use shame as a teaching moment, that's a good thing.
Does shame really differ from embarrassment?
There are degrees. I would say degrees of shame. There's simple everyday embarrassment, like a slip of the tongue or a slip of the slip, we could say. I saw a broadcaster the other day where the camera, panned to her, and it started a gigantic yawn and didn't know she was being taped. When she recognized it, her eyes got very big, and of course I felt for her. But that's just a simple everyday moment of embarrassment.
And shame, you're talking about, goes much deeper, and it is a sense of how people feel about who they are and what they are.
That's right. If it's toxic shame, chronic shame, that is a fundamental sense of being flawed, where you really can't believe that you're lovable. And if somebody is caring, compassionate towards you, you're going to be distrusting of that because you carry this sense of yourself as not being worthy. And it's a terrible thing. It leads to a horrible sense of aloneness, despair.
When you experience shame, you really do feel that there's something basically wrong with you, and therefore no one could really love you because you don't even love yourself. Are there other ways that people really defend against feeling shame or showing their shame?
Yeah, absolutely. And so often it's just completely out of awareness. It's unconscious. But we it's difficult just to acknowledge that you are experiencing shame because we associate it with deficiency, and we often don't want to expose that. So we deny that we're experiencing shame. We push it out of awareness. People will often become aggressive, angry, maybe contemptuous and bullying, because when they experience any kind of criticism, it triggers anger. Sometimes that leads to loss of control. Addictions, defend against it, projection. I can be looking at someone I'm working with, feeling great compassion, but they're convinced in their minds that I'm judging them. And when we really examine it, we find out that, I may ask them, would you look into my eyes and see what you actually experience? And almost always they're going to say compassion. But the projection causes them to create another scenario that really is not reality. There's grandiosity, when, we feel we've got to be perfect in order to be loved. And so we compensate for this inadequacy by trying to impress other people. And like you said earlier, Kim, it just creates distance. It actually can invite other people to feel inferior. It turns people off, and it pushes them away. Depression, I would say, is another defense, unconscious, against shame, where we just completely shut down, we detach, we give up, because we assume rejection. Morrison said that shame settles in like a dense fog, obscuring everything else. So people may feel very isolated and alone because they have actually withdrawn from other people.
So when we're talking about whether shame is an inside job or an outside job, what I'm hearing you say is that it's a lot about the assumptions that we make about what other people think about us, that we use that as kind of ammunition to accuse ourselves or hurt ourselves or think badly of ourselves. So it really is the inside job much more than what someone else has said to us or done to us.
Absolutely. And so often when we have this fundamental sense of unworthiness, we're actually unconsciously looking for evidence to support that. So somebody looks at us,
cross-eyed,
a little funny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just uses the wrong word. It could be anything, but we're looking for evidence that we don't have value. Mm-hmm. And, of course, when we're looking for it, we will find it. We're going to interpret that way.
Yes, and when we think that it's true, we like nothing more than to be right, so that evidence does have to support it. We are talking about shame and why it's so hard to talk about. I'm here with Susan Warren Warshow. I'm Dr. Kim, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
Shame. It's our worst fears realized, that somehow we will be found out to be unlovable or inadequate and therefore rejected. I'm here with my guest, Susan Warren Warshow, and we are talking about shame. Susan, can shame prevent us from realizing our own dreams?
You bet it can. I would say that it not only prevents the realization of our dreams, but it can actually prevent us from forming dreams. And if you don't mind my giving a personal example, years ago, I was media director for LA's first child abuse hotline. And I was great working behind the scenes, setting up interviews for other people. But if somebody handed a microphone to me, it's as though I were allergic. So for many years during my career, I would, for instance, not have accepted this invitation, Kim, to go on your radio show or to speak in front of a group. And as you mentioned, I now have a training institute for therapists, but this is really kind of an amazing development for me, because I really had to work through shame and fear to be able to do this. And the sad part about it is that, there are things that we may love to do, that we would do well, that could really make a contribution to people, but we really deny ourselves and others that opportunity unfortunately, because of shame.
So it's really important to recognize what shame is, what it does to your thought process, and how it really can stunt your growth is what you are saying. It will prohibit you from meeting any new challenges or taking any kind of risk.
Absolutely. As I was saying in the beginning, it inhibits us. It can just totally stop us, shut us down. And it can be quite tragic.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about what are the steps that you had to take in order to work your way through your fear, your shame, in order to start to speak and then start to go out from there to your conferences and workshops.
I would say at the heart of it, we do have to learn to really value ourselves, just being who we are, and not based on performance. And that really does require healthy relationships. We don't do this alone. I don't think it's something we just do in our heads. I think we do need relational experiences that give us an alternative, that convey to us that we are safe, that we can go into new places with other people, and our relationships are going to remain intact. But I'm going to mention a few things here. Being aware that we've got a shame process going on is extremely important. That's the first step. And we also need to have the will to show caring and compassion for ourselves, to actually take an active stance against devaluation. I'm thinking about a man who I have worked with who was very, shame is has been so prominent in his life. And I asked him, that if he stepped into a room where a teacher was belittling his daughter, what would his reaction be? And of course, he would immediately jump to her defense. So I was suggesting, might he also relate to himself in that way? That when he sees any kind of shame, toxic shame process going on, that he has the will to interrupt that. And so, it's awareness, it's will, it's through relationship, it's recognizing that shame will pass if we let it, that the human condition is to have flaws that actually connect us to each other, and to not give shame too much importance or let it take over our lives. Just use it as a signal and move on.
So if we are to see that shame is just a part of being human, that it's always going to be there, but what we can do is that we can work to have it just be a part of who we are and not all of who we are. Exactly. We need to remember that we come into this life with both our limitations and these magnificent aspects of ourselves, and it's part of the whole. Mm-hmm. of who we are. I think that's one of the most important parts, is rather than continuing to fight and struggle over the trying to hide what we label the bad side of ourselves or the shadow aspect of ourselves, that when we can start to embrace that and see that they're connected to the highest part of ourselves, and that we need to look at ourselves more as a whole person instead of these parts that we have to feel shame about because they exist within us. Well put. And you're talking about love, of course, Kim. Mm-hmm. Love embraces all that we are. And we start with that.
and then we're going to have a lot more options in life.
Are we ever healed from shame, or is it a lifelong process?
I would say, it's like the very nature of the fact that we do have limitations, that we're not going to do anything perfectly. And life is always a journey. Our ideals are not the reality. Our ideals are something we strive for. They're great, but we have to remember that it's the human condition to fall short of our ideals. And love, as I was saying, is really about embracing all of that.
Are there differences between men and women and how they experience shame?
Yes, there definitely are. Men, a lot of this let me begin with saying that I don't like to make any kind of gender stereotypes. However, there are definitely social factors and expectations that impact the way men and women feel about different parts of ourselves and emotions that we have. And for example, men will typically go, when they are feeling shamed, they will more likely become angry and lash out, whereas women tend to internalize and really beat up on themselves. I'm remembering a time in the theater where, a woman was asking some teenagers to talk, not so loudly, and a man in front of me said, "Now that is an angry woman." So there definitely are these societal pressures. And, women, are often trying to do everything perfectly. And Brene Brown called this a straitjacket, where I have to make everyone happy. I have to make every relationship work. If I don't, it's a personal failure. I have to also get ahead in my work. There are a lot of conflicting demands, that women will place on themselves.
So that for women, it comes around more that there's a feeling that there's a need to look perfect and be perfect and do perfect, and so there's a lot of shaming around that they have to have the perfect body and be the perfect wife and mother and girlfriend and on and on and on. But for men, it really seems to manifest more that their shame comes out, or that they experience shame through failure.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right, and I'm thinking of a couple of people here, men, who would immediately withdraw. Men may be more likely to withdraw and detach when they feel criticized. And when these men would feel criticized by their wives, they could no longer really talk to them. They just went into another world. And as I worked with them to really reduce this horrible shame that they were unaware of, both of them described to me how they were then able to be with their wives and actually hear them and understand that it's not they're not attacking them. It's not a global condemnation of who they are. And they would say to me, I could actually hear them without feeling threatened. And that, I'm thinking, how one of these men was really beaten by his mother. And when he was able to make that distinction that, my wife really is not my mother, and I do have fundamental values, so I can hear that I may err, I may not always please her, but I'm still at core, a worthwhile person.
How important is it to have healthy relationships to be able to help break that pattern of shame?
I think it's really vital. I think it's through a healthy relationship that we begin to have a more compassionate relationship to ourselves. And, we need relationships where we can be intimate, bring all aspects of ourselves, the whole range of what we feel, which, is humans have wide-ranging emotions. We need to be able to acknowledge them, talk about them, talk about our thoughts freely. And, and I was saying earlier that we need a experience of acceptance to really to be able to heal from shame.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to do this just in your head through a thought process.
Being able to do this in relationship with someone else means that you also have to be somewhat vulnerable to be able to open up. So it seems like the first step, if we were to kind of back up and ask, how can we open up to be vulnerable to do that? We have to develop some resilience to shame. And how do we do that?
Absolutely. Again, it starts by being aware of it, owning it, reflecting on what's triggering it, interrupting that shame self-talk. We need to practice being vulnerable. I'm thinking of somebody who had to go to the ER the other day, and it was not anything physical. Actually, he felt this shame about that, and really through our work, he started calling some friends and was extremely touched by the way they responded to him. So as he did that, his shame evaporated. So he was practicing allowing for vulnerability and discovering the joy of connection that follows it. So, we have to take risks. Really step outside of our comfort zone, and then we'll have the experience that we're going to be closer to people and far more effective.
I'm talking to Susan Warren Warchow, and we're talking about shame, how to recognize it, and perhaps what you can do to move past it in order to create the life that you want. I'm Dr. Kim, and I'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
My guest for the hour is Susan Warren Warchow, and she's a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she also presents and talks about shame. She does have a lot of conferences and workshops, and she will tell us about those at the end of the show. Susan, people often attach their self-worth to what they are producing or what others will think of them, and this seems to be a very dangerous trap. And as I was studying up on this topic, I was also reading from Brené Brown, and she is a researcher and author on shame. Mm-hmm. And she states that the path to working through our shame is that we really have to value courage more than anything other in order for us not have shame take over our lives. And there was a quote that you had talked about with Carl Jung. Do you want to share that one? Because I think it fits here.
I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become.
Yeah, and that would take courage, right?
It surely does. I was saying before that when we go into new places within ourselves and in our lives, we're going to have anxiety, and we're probably going to have shame. And the important thing is that we don't allow it to stop us. Mm-hmm. That we just continue to move forward. And it certainly does take a lot of courage, and at times the risks that we feel we're taking can, it can be extremely uncomfortable. That's just the truth of it. But if we can just keep our eye on our goals, remembering what's most important to us, and it's really what allowed me to become a presenter I had to keep my eye on the contribution I hope to make. And it did involve tolerating some very uncomfortable moments and feelings along the way. But, over time you develop this awareness that you're going to make it, that, these feelings are not going to kill us, that they will pass, and the joy of getting to the other side, can be enormous.
One of the things that I often talk about in the work that I do is that we have to accept that whenever we take a risk or we follow our dreams or it's something that we want, we always have to be aware that the first feeling that's probably going to come up is fear. And surrounding all of that is going to be all of our self-doubt and therefore our shame. And that we just need to accept that it's going to be a part of the process. But what we have to make it is it's just the first step on our journey. It just can't be the last one.
Yes, beautifully put. And then by doing that, we allow ourselves to have a new experience of ourselves and ourselves in relationship, and to discover that the traumas of our childhood, which is really what's inhibiting us, is not the reality, that we can have a very different kind of experience of taking risk that may have been the case at one time in our lives.
Yes, and what I know is that the day that you allow yourself to just be good enough and no longer needing to be perfect is the day that you really are free.
Absolutely, and I think we need to discover that through taking risks.
Well,
right?
That is the only way that we get that prize is by actually challenging
That's
ourselves
right.
and then having the courage to walk through all of that. Yes.
That's right, and having a new experience.
So when would someone really need to seek professional help with this issue of shame?
Okay, well, if we can't identify the feeling of shame, when we're not able to admit mistakes or ask for help, when people are telling us that they don't really know us, they can't feel close to us, when our fear of exposure is so great that we're not trying things, we're not in touch with what we really want to do, and when we notice that we're blaming others habitually, when others may be angry at us, are we lashing out? When we're experiencing that our relationships are not working as a pattern, and when we're suffering emotionally, definitely.
All right, and I think what I would add to that is when you feel just plain stuck is a good time to go.
Yes.
All right. So
Absolutely.
what can you tell us in closing about the most important keys to healing from shame?
Well, when you feel that grip of toxic, poisonous shame in your body, really step up like you would if your own child were under attack. Remember all your good qualities. There's far more to you than this mistake you may have made or something that you feel bad about. Remember that a mistake never destroys anyone and that it will pass. The shame will pass, and we need to remember to embrace our human vulnerabilities. As Brené Brown has told us, that our vulnerabilities are beautiful and they are what connect us to each other.
If someone else would like to reach you, where can they contact you?
Sure. They can go to deftinstitute.com, deftinstitute.com, and my contact information is there. Also, Warren Warshow, WARSHOW.com.
Susan, thank you very much for being here, for facing your fear, coming on. You did a great job, and it was really great info that you have given us and things to think about.
Wonderful, Kim. I really enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you.
I will be right back with some closing comments.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
We have been talking about shame, and I think the most important thing is not to let shame ruin your life. And one of the ways that we talked about being able to do that is that you really have to recognize that this is something that happens to everybody, and it will happen to you throughout your life. It is just a part of the human experience. And so we all really have to learn to live with a certain amount of uncertainty and a certain amount of insecurity. But in the end, you have to remember that it doesn't matter what amount of shame you have. What matters is if you have the courage to do something with it that is productive in your life. So it does come down to a matter of choice. We're never going to be rid of it, but we can learn to live with it. So what does that critical voice in your head tell you about yourself? I want you to really start to be conscious of this and be more mindful, for this is where change needs to occur, in your own head with your own thoughts. Do you know, it was Jim Rohn who really teaches a very simple, practical way to live your life, and that is that every day stand guard at the door of your mind, and you alone will decide on what thoughts and beliefs that you let into your life, for they will shape whether you feel rich or poor, cursed or blessed. If you would like to contact my guest, Susan Warren Warshow, I will post her information on my website at drkimtaylorshow.com. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you have all enjoyed this program. I will be back here, as I am every Thursday afternoon, live at 5 o'clock. You can also listen to the rebroadcast of this show Thursday evening at 10 p.m. and Sunday morning at 9 a.m. right here at KZSB AM 1290. Now, you can also find my past shows by going to iTunes and downloading the free weekly podcast, or you can find them on my YouTube channel. Again, just go to my website. All of the links are there at drkimtaylorshow.com. And of course, I love to hear from you, so send me your emails and comments at drkim@drkimtaylorshow. I want to thank my engineer, Mark Giles, for helping me today get this on. So be well until next week, when I'll be right back here. I'm Dr. Kim, and until then, remember, nobody else has to change in order for you to feel better. So just take note of what is inside your own head and what it is telling you about yourself. Take care.